Hey guys, welcome back. It's Biblical Apologetics. I'm your host, Courtney, and today I've got an interview slash kind of mini teaching for you with there he is. There he is. Rabbi Eduardo, how are you?
What's up, Courtney? How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no. So, for those of you who don't know, Rabbi Eduardo, Messianic Rabbi Eduardo, he hosted my debate with Yosef. Did an amazing job, I thought. Not only that, he's got some DJ experience. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, because there's not a lot of people that have followed your channel, which I find to be crazy, y'all. If you don't know about him, you need to, and that's why we're doing this interview.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So I am a Spanish Jewish person, Puerto Rican as well. So I was brought up in Catholicism, went back to Judaism when I was 19. Family's ethnically Jewish. Always have embraced Yeshua the Messiah, had my ups and downs. Started my ordination process under Rabbi Mark Schulman about 6 or 7 years ago. So I
Uh-huh.
got ordained as a Messianic rabbi. Started my channel 2 years ago called the channel's just Rabbi Eduardo, but the show is Messianic Judaism Unraveled. And
Yeah.
so I've been putting up more content, trying to do live streams, trying to answer people's questions and answer that perspective. So I currently serve as the associate rabbi of a Messianic congregation in Bethlehem, PA. So I have my
That's what's
wife and
up.
my kids and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so you have how many kids do you have again?
5 kids,
5 kids. Look, I don't know
five
how you do
boys.
it. I don't know
Yeah,
how you got
I
a
have
lot
I have
going
three
on.
older I have 3 older sons. And I have 2 little ones. So
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
I've had
yeah.
quite the life. One day we'll have a testimony session, maybe.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. So if for those of you who don't know, if you are looking for, first of all, go ahead and tell them about your history and learning Hebrew, tell us a little bit about that before I kind of segue into some other things.
Yeah, so my undergrad is in Jewish studies and religion studies, and I'm currently applying to graduate school to do a MA and PhD in rabbinic literature. So my focus and my emphasis is rabbinic literature. I've studied Hebrew, I've studied rabbinic Hebrew. Still a student in much of the language aspects. I think you're
Mhm.
always really a student, right?
Yes.
But big fan of what rabbinic literature is, but I think it has to have its right place. Like I love the God of Israel, I love Yeshua the Messiah, I love Scripture, right? So the more that I can know about it, and the way that my Jewish people have read Scripture is very important. I think it's
Yeah.
hard to make a solid defense for who Yeshua the Messiah is if you don't know the other side's opposing position. So if
Yeah.
you're an Arab apologist and you're going to try to debunk the Quran, you need to know the Quran.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I'm trying to debunk rabbinic literature, but only one set of texts can be completely consistent at every point. And for me, that's the Bible, right? It's the
Yeah.
Hebrew Bible and the New Covenant. Rabbinic literature, because it records so many different positions, cannot be consistent at every point. So, in order to elevate Yeshua the Messiah, in order to elevate scripture, there is a sense of needing to debunk the fact that rabbinic literature is consistent at every point.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, the value that I get out of your channel is if I know that I need to find a good source on something, that's where I go. I like your stuff. And I have some other people I go to as well, but especially a messianic source,
Yeah.
like you're pulling out all kinds of things. And then in your comment sections, guys, check out his comment sections, the live chats. I mean, he's got other messianic Jews in there dropping sources. I mean, it's great. It's a great thing because it's not something that I cover a lot on my channel. My channel leans mostly towards the Bible in and of
Mhm.
itself. I value rabbinic literature. I just don't lean very heavily on it for understanding the Bible. Now, I do find that there are a lot of messianics that do, and there are a lot of messianics that say, "Oh, we have value in it. Let's look at it." But I like your approach. I like your look. My position is not unorthodox. My position may be unorthodox for today's Judaism, but is that really the monolithic Judaism as it's presented today? And that's what I like. You go back and you pull out these sources and you're
Yeah.
like, it's absolutely Jewish to believe that, these concepts exist.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not saying that every single rabbi ever agreed in a divine
Right.
Messiah or a supernatural birth of the Messiah or agrees that the Messiah will suffer or that the Messiah must die and be resurrected. I'm not saying every rabbi or every Jewish person believes this. What I'm saying is that within the traditional sources of Judaism, there are voices that agree with the New Covenant, the New Testament testimony. So
Yeah.
what that does is it doesn't bring any new value to the New Covenant or those scriptures. What it does is it verifies that our belief is indeed Jewish and
Yes.
indeed at home with some of the voices of Judaism. I'm
Yeah.
not looking to the rabbis to give me some secret soul or some secret level of knowledge that's going to
Yeah.
give me more intimacy with the God of Israel. What I'm looking for is to be able to tell them, you say my belief isn't Jewish. You say my belief isn't Judaism. Your problem is with Ramban. Your problem is with the Mishnah. Your problem is with portions of the Gemara. Your problem is with some of the voices of Judaism, not so much the New Testament.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I've always made the statement, like most of the time you hear arguments against Yeshua, it's from the perspective of Paul. And in my humble opinion, Paul writes just like a Talmudic Jew, except for
Agreed.
when he's preaching in his long letters,
Yeah.
he's sending stuff back when he quotes the Tanakh or something.
Yeah.
If you go and if you've ever read the Talmud, like for example, you go to like what is the name of the Messiah? All of a sudden, they're pulling out verses from like all over the place, and you're like,
Yeah.
how is this messianic? And then when you go read those, you're like, oh, I can see where they're pulling this out. It's the same thing with Paul, but since Paul is a New Testament quote believer in Yeshua, he's not in the Talmud. Otherwise, I think he would have been put in the Talmud. I mean, he's way too knowledgeable to. Yeah, I mean, it's just there's bias there, and it's unfortunate because it is what it is.
He would have been one of the sages, right? I mean,
Sure.
Paul would have been one of the sages. I mean, he was zealous. He went after the believers, right? He wasn't trying to hear their stuff. He pursued. It's not like he was just chilling on the sideline, eating olives, hanging out, right, getting a tan, right, by the desk. No, he was out there actively pursuing the community, right? Because he was passionate for the God of Israel. He was passionate for the Torah, and he remained passionate for the Torah after. My perspective is that why most people mess up Paul is because they miss how much he seeks to exalt the Messiah.
Amen.
And that's why people mess up Paul, because Paul doesn't want to put anything in front of the Messiah, not even the Sinai covenant. And I think, I just gave a message last week. If people go to my synagogue website, bethelgabor.org, I gave a message called Old Testament, understanding the law. My particular belief and perspective is that a distinction needs to be made between the Sinai covenant and God's overarching Torah. That sometimes when we use law or Torah colloquially, we're not immediately talking about specifically what Paul might be talking about, right?
Yes.
So that's my big thing. He seeks to exalt the Messiah, so sometimes other things seem as not important.
Yeah, no, I would agree completely. I always say Paul gets us down to the nitty gritty. Like, what's the most important aspects? Because no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter whether there's a temple or not, Yeshua and what he is, who he is, that's the most important thing. Because, you can be in the desert and you can be about to starve to death, die of heat, and reach out to God in that moment. You don't need a temple. You don't need a priest. You don't need this mediator. You can reach out to God in your prayers and whatnot. And that's what I think Paul is trying to say. Listen, the law is great. That's a great form of worship, right? To God and obedience. But here's the most important aspect: reach out to God through your mediator. And so for me, he gets down to the nitty gritty. And I like that your channel pulls out those things as well. And then even shows the believers, look, Paul isn't alone in these thoughts, in these aspects. It's read differently just because of bias. That's all.
Yeah.
And so,
agreed.
Let's also really fast for everyone. I've got a little treat for you. Maybe within about 30 minutes or so, we might have a mysterious guest join. He said around 12:30. Not sure if he's going to come or not. Time permitted, he might. But that's just a little. Stay with us. Listen to Rabbi Eduardo. He's got some things he wants to share, some good sources. Let's get into it. Let's see.
So these are just a couple of the podcasts that I've done before, more the recent ones. This was a response to Rav Dror, who talked about that there's no, I don't know if you saw that one yet.
Man, it was great. It was great.
So it was essentially that, Rav Dror tries to tell us that that the Messiah has been rejected, so therefore he can't be the Messiah, right? And so I spent about 40 minutes proving that indeed the Jewish sources and the Bible teaches us that there'll be a suffering Messiah. So, this is an interview I did with Rabbi David Tokajer, and we talk about Gentiles and the law, which I think if you are from the nations and you embrace Yeshua the Messiah and you are on this Torah path, please watch that. And this really is my 2-hour sort of encapsulating how I feel about not being under the law to filling seats in the spirit and what all of that relates to. And on July 18th, I'll be talking with Dr. Michael Brown about apologetics and the rabbinic world, which should be super awesome.
Real fast, I got to interrupt you. Is that one going to be live streamed?
That's live streamed, yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be in the comment section.
Yeah, do it. Come on through. Yeah, we're going to, because I think that this is the thing, right? Many people want to use rabbinics, and there's big names and smaller names who want to use rabbinics to show Yeshua. But I think people don't do it in a way that is healthy
Yeah.
and faithful to the plain reading of scripture. They
Yeah.
allow rabbinics to add to the text. Rabbinics
Yes.
should only give us a width of understanding, never a depth, right?
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
kind of the way I think about it. You can
Elaborate,
get a
elaborate, elaborate on that a little more if you
so
don't mind.
so rabbinic lit, and this is part of what I'll talk to Dr. Brown about. It gives us a
Oh,
width because it's not specifically what we're going to talk about, but related to, and I can talk
yeah.
about it more now. It's no problem.
Okay.
The
Cool.
a width of relationship to not really the law or depth of God, but a width of understanding the text.
Okay.
Recognizing that, and this is what we're going to talk about, so this is a good segue. The way the rabbis read the passages, they will
Uh-huh.
see the Messiah, or they'll see halachic rules or ways to do things where the average Christian, the average person from the nations, is not going to see the Messiah.
Yes.
They're not going to see a halacha, a rule, a law, an interpretation, right? Because of the tradition of reading the passage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so
Totally.
reading the passage that way, reading the passage the way the rabbis reads it, if it's faithful to the plain meaning of the text, can give us a width, meaning that it gives us points to pick up and relate to the passage that we can follow this chain in thinking about, for example, the Messiah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. So it's a little bit kind of like what I covered with Bible scholar Igal Gehrman not too
Mhm.
long ago. I asked him, what are some things that you see in the New Testament that are distinctly Jewish that maybe a non-Jewish reader would not pick up on? And that's that width that I think you're kind of
Yeah,
getting at,
absolutely.
that gives you the ability to pull out of the text kind of something to there, but not depth,
Yep.
right? Am I getting it?
Yeah, not a depth because there's no bottomsome value that you're adding to my knowledge of God, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
not going to teach me more about his holiness, right?
Yeah.
Just because of explaining 13 attributes of God from Jewish tradition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a random example, right?
Right,
You're
right.
not going to add to my depth about who the Messiah should be or what he should be like. You might add to my width because you're plugging and linking in chains more verses
Yeah.
for and
Yeah.
the picture, the ultimate picture of who the Messiah would be. And remember,
Yeah.
when we talk about rabbinic literature and we talk about the picture of the Messiah, there are pictures of the Messiah, right?
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
so the picture that we're going to give you today is one picture of the Messiah of some of the voices within Judaism that line up with the New Testament reality.
All right, let's get it. I'm
Cool.
excited. Let's do
Let's
it.
do it. All right. So whenever we look at passages, whenever we look at verses, we have to understand that the way the rabbis read them is not always the way that we read them. But in Genesis 38, there's this story about Judah and Tamar, and he goes off and his son Onan is spilling seed on the ground. We know all about that.
Yeah,
So he gets the okie doke from the Lord. Keep going on, right? More brothers, fine. He doesn't have any brothers. Okay. Judah goes down, sees this harlot, lays with her. She comes up
right.
pregnant, winds up being her. Crazy story, right? Kids,
Yeah.
read your Bible. Okay.
Yes.
It's better than any movie or show you watch. Crazy stuff happens,
Fact,
right?
fact. Like there's drama,
It's
there's
crazy.
suspense, there all of
Things
it.
are, yeah, there's action, people getting smacked. You read the book of Judges, people getting stabbed, poop comes out. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, it's
So
great. It's great stuff.
it
Like,
is
I don't know, it used to be boring, but until you really get into it, like
yes,
you got to know the context, like for sure.
yes.
Yeah,
And
you
we
don't
don't
ever want
make
to come in on like the middle of a movie and be like, "What's going on?" You know?
agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed. And like I said, there's not light stuff in here. I mean, there's incest, there's
yeah.
rape, right? There's murder, there's war. I mean,
Human
there's
defilement, human internal defilement.
agreed. There are
Sure.
levels of things. We're not talking about, Yeshua sits on a rock and says, "Blessed are the poor," right? This is
Yeah,
not the whole Bible, right? I mean,
right.
the Bible is intense. It represents man's condition and it's
Yes.
powerful stuff. Anyway, so he gets her pregnant. She has two babies in her womb. The first one comes out. They put a scarlet thread on the hand, right? Calls the other one Sirach, right? But the first son is the one that I really want to focus on, right? That as the first one's coming out, the other one burst out. And in the yellow, I have it there. The woman who's delivering the baby, she says, "What a breach you've made for yourself." So his name was Perez. "Vatome ma paratsta alecha, Perez, vayikare shemo Paretz." Do you notice in the red it has that pay the ration, the final, and the sadi, and then the final sadi in the other ones?
How do you?
The idea is that the Peretz, the verb, is a breaking forward, that somehow this
Yeah.
baby it is not running the natural course, right? That the other brother was a little stronger,
Yeah.
but this one went boom, he burst out through the other one. And the woman watches says, "This is a crazy thing. Like, how did
Yeah.
this even happen that this baby who wasn't in the front You don't have much real estate space in your
Look,
mama.
look, I
Go
was
ahead.
about
Go
to
ahead.
say, as
Go
a
ahead.
woman, I can promise you, I feel for her and no, that's not easy. So,
Agreed. It's not like, it's not like you called an Uber and got to the other
right.
side of the uterus and kept it moving, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The baby burst through and pushed the other baby out the way. There's not a lot of real estate space. The
Mm-mm.
woman who's seen this happening, she says, "Look at what you've done. Like, you've made a breach, you made a Perez for yourself, right?
Yeah,
You've Perazta, you've broken out, right?" And so she
yeah,
named him Perez. And the English is difficult, but it's really the same noun and the same verb that we're talking about.
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
many in ancient Israel, their names were received from verbs of things that
Yeah,
happen, right?
what they did, yeah.
Moshe has a son. What does he call him? Gershom. Why? Because I was a Gershom. I was a foreigner there, right? So this is not odd. But what's interesting is that as we go through scripture, we see multiple lines of Peretz and the root and a seed and a redeemer. That remember that the rabbis, the way they read the text is not the way that we read the text.
Uh-huh.
We, as some people, as believers, distant from the rabbinic mind, if you are distant from the rabbinic mind, you don't go to yeshiva, you're
Yeah,
not going to
yeah,
know what root has to do with Perez, right?
right.
What does Ruth have to do? But let's read the verse. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel." See, I want people to understand that the Goel in the red, right? This is the
Yeah.
redeemer. For the normal person reading the Bible, you go to a church, Baptist, Protestant, wherever you're at, you're reading the Bible, you read the book of Ruth, you read the book of Genesis, you don't make the connection.
Mhm.
But the rabbis do make the connection. When we go to Midrash Rabbah Ruth, it says, "And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left thee this day without a near kinsman." This is the passage. "Just as this day holds dominion in the skies, so shall your seed produce one who shall hold dominion and rule over Israel forever." What does Ruth have to do with these things? We'll keep going. Rabbi Chunya said, "It was as a result of the blessing of these women that the line of David was not cut off entirely in the days of Athaliah." Rabbi Tanchuma said, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, "Elsewhere is written that we may preserve the seed of our father." It's not written son, but seed. That seed which comes from another place. Who's the seed? This is the Messiah.
Yeah.
Plainly.
Yeah. You know
Go
what's
ahead.
crazy? You know what's crazy?
Go ahead.
Is and it just hit me as I'm watching this. And if I turn around, I think I just saw someone pull up. So I might have to like let you take over for just a
Cool.
second.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't done it yet, but I have there's like I don't know how to put it yet into video format. So I'm still studying it, but like pada and like got all the root words
Yeah.
having different distinct meanings, one leaning more towards a physical redeeming
Mhm.
and one leaning like pada more towards a resurrectional redeeming. And
Interesting.
so I haven't yet figured that out, but like looking at some of this, I'm seeing it's like, again, unless you study some of these things, you're not going to pull these connections out where the rabbis do. And I can, same thing with
Agreed.
me pulling this out. So that's what's up. I like
Agreed.
it.
And what I think is interesting is that, I don't believe in oral Torah. I don't believe there's an oral Torah from Mount Sinai, the way that we have it today. But I do believe that there are traditions and ways that the texts have been read. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
why our Septuagint readings sometimes are a little subtly different, right? Because there
yeah,
were traditions associated with the way they read things. But
yeah.
remember, the traditions and the oral passing down of how we read things are not absolutely authoritative, right? Only scripture is absolutely authoritative.
Right, right.
But we can look at this and say, okay, the rabbis, the sages of Israel, are putting together different verses. So we have
Hmm.
Genesis 19:32, which is quoted here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
We have the Genesis passage with Judah and Tamar, and then we have Ruth. Okay. All these things are connected because they're drawing a picture of who? The Messiah.
yeah.
Okay.
And really fast, guys, if you look at this and you go, what does Ruth have to do with this? Remember that, especially if you're one of my haters that just can't stand the fact that Paul does some of these things where he'll pull out a passage and it doesn't seem to make any sense. I want you to remember this. The rabbis do the same thing. But if
Agreed.
you actually study it with an open, like to actually hear this rabbi out, he may have something worth value. Same thing for Paul, guys. Please don't forget that. Sorry,
Agreed.
continue.
Yeah. No. And I think that's the key, right? Is that they are reading the passage. And remember that the difference between Paul and some of the rabbis, and I'll say it, and I'm not too shy to say it, right? Paul spoke by Ruach HaKodesh. He spoke by the Holy
Amen.
Spirit, right? The
Mhm.
rabbis don't always speak by Ruach HaKodesh, right? Because they're not giving us scripture. How can
Amen.
I can prove that? Because they contradict each other all the time, right? When
Yeah.
there's two different opinions, what's the final verdict? Elu ve'elu devarim Elohim Chai, right? These and these are the words of the living God. So, but we don't have these sort of contradictions in scripture where two opinions are brought down. So continuing on, we see Genesis 19:32. Let's read that Genesis 19:32, they're saying is referring to the Messiah. Okay. Thus, both the daughters of Lot, first, come, let us make our father drink wine and let us lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. What's this passage? It's about Lot, right?
Yeah.
And he leaves with his two daughters. They say, look, there's no men in this world. They were in one cave, right? Talk about, you got to think about this in real life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
man's there with his daughters, and they're like, we're never going to have children, right? Because, in the
Yeah.
ancient world, if you had no children, right, there was something missing from we didn't have all these things to occupy us, right?
Yeah, for
Sleeping
sure.
around, going online, all these other things, right? They wanted a family, right?
Yeah.
So these women, because of you can have a holy desire for something, yet be driven to something depraved because of what began as a holy desire, right? Because you try
Yes.
to get it yourself.
Yes.
This is what happened with these daughters. So they said, look, let's get our dad drunk. He likes vodka, whatever. So they poured him Russian vodka. Thus, both daughters of Lot were with child by the father. The firstborn bore a son called who? Moab. He's the father of the Moabites. As for the
Yeah.
younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He's the father of Ammonites. Where does Ruth come from?
Of course, the line that everyone, something that comes from an indecent line,
Yeah,
which is,
the
I'm trying
Moabites.
not to take too much. I'm
No,
taking
you
too much of
jump
your
in.
time.
Jump in. It's all good.
I
It's
know,
all
I
good.
know. It's always, he's from an indecent line. He's from an indecent line. Like, we're going to go back to indecent line. I mean, you have a Moabite in the line of Yeshua through Ruth, who married. Like, are we really going to use that as a sticking point as to why Yeshua is not the Messiah?
Yeah,
Like,
agreed.
that's what you're going to hang your hat on. Like, let's go back. Let's go back.
Yeah,
That's
and
that unequal weights and measures, not
agreed.
holding the Tanakh to the same standard as you hold the New Testament. Sorry, I don't mean
The
to.
No,
Go
you're
ahead. Go
good.
ahead.
This is good, but no, hop in as much as you want. And this is what it's saying. When it talks about seed, right, and preserving the father and the seed that's happening, that's related to the kinsman redeemer, who is Boaz. There's an image that the rabbis are drawing up for us as they
Yeah.
are in conversation with each other. We have a lot of things going on politically right now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm not one for really commenting on politics, but that people are talking to the Constitution as if it's a thing that's alive, right? They're
Right.
engaging in the
Yeah.
conversation with the Constitution and the
Like a
founding
living
fathers
document.
from
Yeah.
hundreds of years ago, right? What does
Yeah.
it mean? What is it saying to us today? As if the Constitution is speaking to us, right? Because
Hmm.
in a sense, it does. And so the rabbis who are existing in the medieval period in the fourth century, they're engaging with the authors and the writers of the Tanakh who were speaking to the rabbis, who were speaking to other ones, and they're in conversation with each other about these passages. And they're
Hmm.
piggyback off of each other's ideas, saying, I heard from my rabbi this thing that lines up with this. And if you're saying this, then this matches up with this. So we're
Hmm.
seeing the idea about the kinsman redeemer. We're seeing the idea about this passage over here, whereas the Perez, the breaking forward, we're seeing all these things are intertwined. That Ruth gets a kinsman redeemer, that God has not forgotten, right? And what is
Hmm.
that seed they're referring to? The seed that comes through Moab. And let's keep going. And if you're a believer in Yeshua, you definitely believe Genesis 22:18. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. Who is the seed? This is the Messiah.
And also, so I don't know how, I mean, have you seen the interpretation of when it says blessed? It's veniverechu, which essentially means grafted in. It's
Hmm.
a Mishnaic form to mean to graft, to
That's
bring.
interesting.
So yeah, so I covered a little bit on my channel. I've covered it in like 2 or 3
Yeah.
videos. I don't have a specific video on it, but yeah, it comes from a Mishnaic verb, which basically just means to graft in, which is funny because some of the stuff that I've covered, especially when you get to Isaiah 7, is the real concern here is, God, if you're going to scatter us and you're going to send us in exile, how are you going to fulfill your promise that there would be a Messiah? The lineage is going to start to become, lost. And how are you going to fulfill this? And so going back and you look at this promise, so we could read it, in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be grafted in.
Yeah.
Right. And how does that happen if we're scattered and then scattered and then scattered? And then it kind of takes you into Isaiah 27, where this is exactly how the Lord contends with Israel. It literally says, by warfare and exile, I, the Lord, contend with you, Israel. And so you're like, I'm starting to see this picture and
Mhm.
see why the rabbis would see this as a grafting in process. Because you start scattering, who's Israel?
Yep.
Who is Israel? I mean,
Agreed.
the Bible doesn't tell us to, get DNA testing to find out who you are. You have to,
Yeah.
God knows who you are, and He's controlled all of this. But as people, we go, God, how are you going to still fulfill your promise if you
Mhm.
scatter us and we
Agreed.
become so diluted and watered down and,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So,
Yeah.
yeah, check that out. I'll send you some stuff on it. They never
Yeah,
rest.
yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the huge thing is this, right? Is that we know somehow through Abraham's seed, all the world is going to come into the knowledge of God, right? Through
Yes.
that seed, a singular one, this seed, right? This one that's going to come. And this is the idea of this passage, right? That through the Perez, the breaking forth, through Ruth being a descendant of Moab,
Mhm.
being brought back into that family, being a descendant of Lot, that there was a sort of waywardness, a parting between Abraham and Lot. And now
Yeah.
the descendant of Lot is brought near, brought back into the covenantal line, right? And
Yep.
that the Messiah is going to come through this Gentile, non Israelite person, right? So to speak. And so
Mhm.
in the line of the Messiah, you have this unique thing that's happening. And I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
if you look at Romans 11 and if you understand Romans 11, the olive tree analogy, and you
Yeah.
understand that in my position, I don't know what your position is, I'm not sure, but
It's
my
my
position
favorite. 10 and 11 are my
is
favorite
yeah,
Roman chapters.
it's all the root is Abraham, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion. Reason being because that is the promise that allows the grafting and process,
Uh-huh.
right? Yeshua is the substance and the sustenance of the nourishment, right? But the
Uh-huh.
real power behind that is the promise that God gave to Abraham in that blessing, right? Yeshua is the fruition of that. He's like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
He's
I feel
that
you.
which
I understand.
empowers
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So these are images and ideas that we're getting about the Messiah. So look at what Shimon Rabbah says, and there's more drawing together. And look, it's interesting that this you have this short Genesis 38 passage about Perez, right? And then in Shemot Rabbah, these are third, fourth century commentaries on the most of the books of the Bible. You have Ruth in there, you have Esther. It's on most of the smaller scrolls. It's on the Torah, and these commentaries are interpretations and understanding and traditions of reading the Torah and how it was read. And look at what it says in Shemot Rabbah. This is the history of Perez, and it has a profound significance. When the Holy One created his world, there was as yet no angel of death. Of course, this makes sense because there was no death, right? But when Adam and Eve fell into sin, all generations were corrupted. Not just Abraham's line, not just the other everybody. But
Uh,
when Perez arose,
wait,
ready?
wait, wait. Is that rabbinic literature that all generations
We're
are
corrupted.
corrupted?
Yep.
Oh man. So,
Even Am Yisrael, even
yeah.
the biggest of the Gedolim have been
Yes.
corrupted, right?
Yeah, yeah. Go
Um,
ahead.
when Perez arose, history began to be fulfilled through him, because from him the Messiah would arise. And in his days, the Holy One will cause death to be swallowed up. As is written, he would destroy death forever, Isaiah 25:8. The
Amen.
rabbis are reading this passage. They're looking at Perez. They're looking at the seed. They're looking at now they're not mentioning the Genesis 22 passage. And I think there's a reason for that. It's a reaction to the early believers in Yeshua who saw in this the promise of the seed. I think there's a reaction to distance themselves from it
Yeah, for
intentionally.
sure.
Not that there aren't references to it, but I think it's less prevalent because an intention of the early sages of Israel to distance themselves from it. But here we see Perez, we see the seed, we see the Goel, we see the Redeemer, we see this idea of being brought forward and being made anew, and we see all these things happening. And what's going to happen at that point? The Messiah is going to come from Perez, and he's going to destroy death forever.
Notice destroy death, guys. Destroy death. This is what is important. I think a lot of people miss this. Like this is an honest question from Jews, and I actually think it's a great question that as believers we need to be able to answer. If Yeshua is the Messiah and the New Testament says he quote did away with sin, why is sin still here? Why does it still exist? This is the key here, that he will destroy death forever, i.e., he is your resurrection. Guys, there is a difference between destroying death and that eternal punishment, showing that there's death on earth, but there's eternal punishment as well. And then understanding that we can still sin. He didn't stop that. We can still sin. He paid the punishment for the sin.
Agreed.
And that I think is what is being pulled out here. Because it even mentions no angel of death yet. It takes you all the way back. So this is a great passage for really pulling that out and showing that the Redeemer is indeed the one who will destroy death forever through, of course, what Hashem allows him to do. So
Yeah, it's if you lived in another island or somewhere that was maybe a less culturally developed place, right? Maybe no written language, right? That sort of thing, no internet. And these people are existing very tribal, to the earth kind of people.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't have a religious system so developed, right? But they know they're going to die.
Yeah.
And you establish the idea that no one's going to die. This is amazing. That
For
not
sure.
that people don't physically die, but that death is dealt with. How can
Yeah.
death be dealt with? Death is inevitable. I'm killing animals to eat. I know
Yeah.
people are getting sick. We don't have, so this idea that from Perez, from a breaking forth, the Messiah comes forward to do
Yeah.
what? To break forth and destroy death. There's something supernatural intertwined with the Messiah, and because it's based in what Perez does. See, the rabbis don't read the text the way most Christians, most Messianics read the text plainly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Next
This is
one.
why I think two houses, these two peeps need to come together and at least be able to hear one another. I think we
What two
both have
peeps? Which
value.
ones?
Two
The the
the
Christians
two
and the
house,
Messianics?
two camps. Yeah, we should be able to sit at the same
Oh, yeah,
table
absolutely.
and midrash, together
Yeah,
because each one has a different piece of the puzzle.
agree. And I think the biggest thing is that, to be honest, most people can't defend their own position, so they don't like opposition, right?
Yeah,
So it causes them to crumble and it makes them look. I don't think everybody needs to go to the public square and have a debate with somebody publicly. I don't think
totally
people are
agree.
equipped for that, right? And I know you don't agree with that either, but I
Yeah, no, no,
think
no.
we should
I
be
feel
able to talk, right? And have respect and share disagreements and still respect each other, right?
yeah.
But people don't like doing that anymore. All right, let's keep going. So what's the key? When we look and this is the only New Covenant passage I'm using, but Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram. And if you continue with these genealogies, we come to Yeshua the Messiah. If you're just reading the first chapter of Matthew, there's nothing in it that should be contradictory to what the rabbinic expectation of the Messiah there, right? Whatever you read in Matthew 1, you should be cool. Okay, fine. It's in the line of Perez. This is what we expect of the Messiah. Comes to be Yeshua. Cool. You should have no issues with it. What do you think?
None, nothing, no issues. I think it's great. Keep going.
All right, let's keep going. All right, so Midrash Tanchuma is from Bereshit Vashev. If you read Midrash Tanchuma, it's another Midrash compilation. Midrash comes from the verb darash to give an explanation, a preaching, that sort of thing. In the portion of Vayeshev, look what it says. Thus Judah profited because from him came forth. They're spending a lot of time talking about a dude that got his son's wife pregnant because he didn't want to give him the next kid, right?
Yeah,
They're spending a lot of time on this guy, right?
yeah.
For those that are of other religious systems, you will not find a text that deals with the reality of the failure of its main characters than the Bible, right?
I like that. I
That's why
like
we have
that.
a reason to believe it. So, yeah, it's dope. It's dope. Thus Judah profited because from him came forth Perez, from Hezron, from whom are descended David and the Messiah. And Messiah is the king. He who will save Israel. Behold, how great the difficulties the Holy One gave until he was to raise up the Messiah king from Judah. He of whom it is written, and the Spirit of the Lord will be upon him. Isaiah 61, 1-3. So for us to say that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Yeshua the Messiah at the immersion of Yochanan is not against the testimony because the Messiah is breaking forth. He's coming out. He's doing the unexpected. He's going to deal with death, and the Spirit of the Lord is going to be upon him. What is contradictory to the new covenant faith?
Dude, I love it. I love it. I love it. And you know what's even better? I'm sorry, I get really giddy about this stuff just
Yeah,
because
no,
this is
let's
where my
go.
heart is. This is my passion.
Yeah.
And this is why Luke 4 mentions, I believe it's Luke 4, mentions this when Yeshua stood up and he read from the Isaiah 61, he read from the Isaiah scroll, and then he rolls it up and he says, this was fulfilled in your hearing. Bro, everybody stood up like, is this real life? Like, are we about to get saved in the way that they were viewing this? But notice he stops short of the judgment portion. He only talks about the redeeming portion, i.e., defeating death, right? Paying the punishment. So guys, when you read this, read it with that understanding. Look, I mean, it's clear that they are seeing something here. And this is, important. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. And then if you go back and you look at the attributes of what that Spirit of the Lord is in the Tanakh, come on, guys. There's only so much denial you can do before you're just blatantly denying something.
Yeah. And
All
and
right.
I don't sorry to me. Oh, he's
No,
ready?
go ahead. Finish
Okay,
up.
go.
We're going to bring the
Yeah.
special guest in a minute.
I didn't. Yeah, so I'll keep going. So we're not saying that all the rabbis agree and all the rabbis believe these things, but the idea is that there are voices that agree with us, right? And look what it says in Midrash Genesis Rabbah. Judah was busy taking a wife while the Holy One, blessed be he, was creating the light of the Messiah, right? So the light of the Messiah was found within what Judah was doing. And now Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides, who lived towards the end of the 13th century, he describes the birth of Perez like this. And this is in the rabbinic Bible with the rabbinic commentaries. He was encircled by a hedge and he was enclosed within it. That is why it said, so this is how you've broken through the hedge and come out from within it. Perez was the firstborn through the power of the Most High. Supernatural birth we have here. I will give to him a firstborn son. This was written about the holy person who is to come, David, the king of Israel. Long may he live. Those who are wise will understand.
Yes.
Awesome. Do you want to bring him in right now? We could just keep going.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Are you ready?
Ready.
Just give me a thumbs up if you're ready. I don't want to bring you in if you're not ready yet. Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. I was saying ready, and let's bring them in. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey. Pretty good. I have to get going soon.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but my wife can stay on for a little bit. So
okay.
So that's gonna be a little weird. Sorry about that.
It's okay. How are you, man? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
So I've never met your wife. I've never met you, but I've heard a lot about you. David, how are you? Do you have a brief moment? Just a brief moment. I know you're busy.
Yeah. Sorry I have to go. This looks like really interesting. If you do this again, I would definitely like to join you. This looks really interesting. What you're going through here. The little bit that I've been able to see. So.
Maybe you guys can connect later.
Yeah.
Rabbi and David.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we're friends on Facebook, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. So I'm again not really sure how long you're gonna. Are you? Your wife is gonna. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
My name is David. My wife.
No. I know your name. Your wife's. I'm sorry.
Rivkah.
Okay. Yeah. Nice to meet you. So, are you going to be joining us or?
She will be joining. I need to go out. I forgot and scheduled something else that I need to do. Okay. Sorry about that.
Cool.
That's okay.
Okay.
So, all right. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. And I'm basically, I have 2 or 3 more slides and we'll finish it. So
yeah, cool.
Hey, Rivkah, cool. How are you?
Good. I'll mute because I do have kids in the background. So
yeah, no problem. So there's a rabbinic work known as the priestly blessing, which quotes Isaiah 11 and Psalm 110. And remember that the rabbis are knitting passages together, right? And it says the last savior is the Messiah, the son of David, who's descended from Judah's son Perez. This is the Messiah king, as is written, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, and the Lord will extend your mighty scepter from Sion. I wish I had my air horn. Boom, 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 boom.
I know, look, bro, I don't have that.
It's all right. Well, I'll send you an air horn. Don't worry about it. We have to understand the way the rabbis read the scriptures. And then we're going to get into what I think is one of the more fascinating ones. When we read Zechariah 6:12, that talks about the shoe, and remember, this is choter, it's a different word, but it still talks about something coming out of the ground that's supernatural. It's surprising. I don't expect it to be there. I explain it like if I'm driving down the middle of the road and I'm on a concrete road and this big tree just sprouts up in front of me. What is this tree doing? Tree, how are you so strong that you broke through the concrete? This is the idea of the shoot or the branch coming out. And midrash Rabbah Numbers in the portion Korach says, behold, a man whose name is a shoot, he will shoot up. Zechariah 6:12. This refers to the Messiah. It's not me saying that the shoot refers to the Messiah. This is midrash Rabbah. And it also says, I will raise unto David a righteous shoot, and he shall reign as a king and prosper, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. Jeremiah 23:5. Courtney, what do you think?
Yeah, well, see, I don't know if a lot of you see, Israel was agrarian. And so if you don't know much about dendrology, which is the study of trees, you're not really going to understand this. So if you go out, for example, a sweet gum tree, if you cut a sweet gum tree down, give it a few months, especially if it's in time where it's going to be sending off shoots, you'll start to see shoots. I mean, the tree appears dead. You lobbed it off completely. And then you start to see new shoots coming up. Okay. That's what this is talking about. It appears as though, this tree has dried up and it's gone. And then underground, way down the line, pop, up comes a shoot. And that's Mashiach. And so, and this is one of those passages universally agreed upon by Jews and Christians, that this is about the Mashiach, not just any Mashiach, but the Mashiach. And I think that's important to really show, because a lot of people don't know the passages. There's 5 main passages that are Messianic that we all agree are Messianic. We just view them in different ways. And this is where pulling out some of the chazal and sages and things like that is important. So
yeah, and this just shows that the reading of this is an accurate reading to say this is about the Messiah, right? Dr. Michael Brown always says this, which I think is really interesting. Nowhere in Scripture does it stop and say, "Hold the music. This is about the Messiah," right?
Yeah.
Nowhere does that happen. He's done that in his debates with others, and he shared that, and that's true. We rely on interpreting the passage, but here we are proving that this interpretation, the Zechariah 6:12, the shoot, the coming out, the hote, all these things relate to the Messiah, right? And these next two verses, next two quotations I'm going to bring out, the ones we wanted to talk about, which you asked me to talk about, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. Okay.
Yes.
And
This is a good one, guys.
Which is nice because he kind of keeps going forward for the Samach. And remember, we're talking about different rabbis, a different time period, 3rd or 4th century for the midrash rabbah. We're now in the 11th century, somebody writing in Judeo-French, right? About the same time as Rashi. Here we go. Genesis rabbah, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. Now, I am full aware, don't send me an email that this is not a contested source. I know that this is contested. We don't have this in its original autographs. We don't have actual manuscripts of Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan's midrash. We don't have that. Reason why we don't have that, in my opinion, is that it was suppressed because of how much it supported the Yeshua claim. Now, if you watch this video up until now and you don't want to look at these next two slides as part of the evidence, fine. Everything else still stands on its own because everything else is still heavily attested. But look at what he says. What art thou, a great mountain? Zechariah 4. This great mountain is the Messiah. Why does he speak of him like this? Because he is greater than the patriarchs. Behold, my servant shall prosper. Isaiah 52:13. And then he writes, I've learned it from the words of Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, the person who's conveying it. The Redeemer whom I shall raise up from among you will have no father. Boom, 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 boom. Right?
Yeah, man. I've got some stuff. It's just not going to hit as hard
it's all
as
good.
yours.
No worries. No worries. No worries. That's my own head. As it's written, behold, the man whose name is Zemach, the branch, he shall branch up out of his place. And so Isaiah says, and he came up like a sucker.
Go back to the next slide real fast.
Last one?
Yeah, the last one. Yeah. Okay. No. The one before that that you already covered. Okay, so just so everyone knows, these two passages, Zechariah and Yirmiyahu, those two passages are related to the five mentions of the branch that are uncontested. All right, skip forward. So and then Zechariah 4 goes into the same aspects. Like, guys, these are passages that you really have to study to understand, because just like he said, there's no passage I get all the time. Where does it say the Messiah is going to do this, this, and this? Well, my response is, where does it say? You agree that these passages are about the Messiah? When they say yes, I'm like, where does it say that? Where does it say this is the Messiah, son of David? And they're like, it doesn't. You have to interpret it. And the way that we interpret that is one text upon one text upon one text that feeds into the next one. And it cannot conflict with each other. It has to just build your understanding. This is why when you go back to the beginning, you don't see the Messiah called the Messiah. You see aspects of he's a light, the servant. And, by the time you migrate your way through the Tanakh, he has like 20 different titles or names, aspects that help you to interpret the rest of the Bible. It's more about univocality than a lot of people see. So there's a lot of scholars that say there's no univocality, which I fundamentally disagree with. There's a lot of univocality within the scriptures, even though they're written in separate times, one's to Judah, one's to Israel.
Speaking of one voice.
It's one voice. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one voice, univocality.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Cool. All right. So last slide. And this is just the last verse. This is continuing on in the midrash Genesis Rabbah, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. Says Rabbi Barachia, the Holy One said to Israel, you have spoken before me, saying we are orphans and have no father. So what he's doing is he's saying the path of the Messiah and the path of Israel are the same path. Now, Israel can't do what the Messiah does because the natural branches fail and the wild branches fail, right? It's the mercy of God. But the Messiah comes and fills that role. So that what can be said of Israel can be said of the Messiah. So that's why when they look at Lamentations 5:3 says, we are orphans that have no father, he's able to kick it back and say that I've learned that the Messiah would have no father. Why? Because the Messiah ultimately fulfills what would have been the path of Israel. He goes on to say, the Redeemer who I shall raise up, out of your midst. Behold, a man whose name is a branch. He shall branch up out of his place. And similarly, he came up as a sucker before him, right? He will have no father. Why? Because Israel says that they're orphans, but the Messiah will truly, really have no father.
Yeah, and guys, pay attention. Notice there, Isaiah 53 is mentioned. And then when you go read Isaiah 53, verse 2, you find other branches that ultimately are going to take you to another passage that branches off to another passage. So for those of you who haven't looked at all the videos on my channel, I've got a video called The Promise. And in The Promise, I try and describe this as a Bible web, so to speak. There's a web with Mashiach in the middle, and each line of the web branches off and then interconnects. You ever seen a web, you step back and you're like, man, that's amazing that a spider does this within like 24 hours, right? They link all these webs together. That's kind of how the sages would have interpreted things. They're going to go have two main lines, and then they're going to connect those with a small little looping. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So watch that video. It's called The Promise, guys. The video I've did. So let's see. Do you have anything to add, David or Rivkah?
You're muted still, brother.
Muted, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of these different kinds of passages. The Moshe Hadarshan is sort of a difficult one, like you brought up. There's ArtScroll is coming out now with something, and whatever ArtScroll has on Moshe Hadarshan, that's sort of there's some people who follow ArtScroll. There's some people who think ArtScroll is sort of out of bounds. But they are coming out with a new edition of Moshe Hadarshan, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. And so, I mean, there's a bunch of other things in here as well. Like I always like to go to Zechariah chapter 12 because you can really go back to the Talmud that talks about it being about Mashiach. And there's Yalkut Me'am Loez, which also has some great stuff in Zechariah chapter 12. I know you're in Zechariah chapter 6 and talking specifically about the idea of the name of the branch being about Mashiach. There's other places of the name as well that I think you really can look at and get into more things as well. But the branch is good. The Rosh Tovot in Isaiah 11 actually say Yeshu Hanotzer, which is neat if you take the name Yeshu. The Rosh Tovot of that. So that's sort of something interesting and neat, just sort of off the top of my head. And sorry, I can't give you more information. I have to go.
No, it's all good. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
But next week I hope to be able to give more time to it. I just have to extra plan for it.
Yeah, it's all good.
A rough week.
Yeah, no.
But this is good stuff that you're doing, showing it from midrash and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, my particular perspective is that we're not, like I said, I mean, you weren't here for the earlier part, but my particular perspective is that we can prove that these perspectives about Yeshua from the New Covenant are indeed Jewish, right? Not that every rabbi agrees with Yeshua, but that, there are voices that agree with the New Covenant writers, right?
Right. Or at least the Covenant writers the New Covenant writers are at least following in a Jewish tradition. Whether you can agree or disagree with that is sort of a Jewish thing to disagree on things.
Yeah.
But the idea that it comes from a kosher source, so to speak, is pretty. I would say there's pretty much a lot of evidence that speaks to that it does come, in fact, from a kosher source.
So, David, real fast for my viewers who may not know you, you are Jewish. You keep halacha. Really fast. I know you got to go. I really, I don't know if you've had a chance to look in what I do, but I thought I really would love to get a perspective from your own words, how things happen, your family. It kind of rose to the light here with everything going on, and I'm sitting back watching this happen and feel very bad for you, so.
Right. So there is sort of some questions about my heritage. As far as I knew, I grew up non-Jewish, but then I dated a Jewish girl, and she said, "Are you sure your mother's not Jewish?" And I said, "Well, Ma, what's your mom's family like?" And long story short, one of them says, "We weren't told we were Jewish when we were born, but it seems as if we were. They were involved in our marriage." So I'll leave it as a suffix, I guess you'll say.
Yeah.
I had Chabad look into it. They gave me a Hatafik Dam Bris, called me up before the shul, gave me an aliyah, sort of confirmed my keeping of Torah, and then promptly sort of asked me to leave the shul once it sort of came out a lot of what I said. So that's sort of that. Rivkah was not Jewish, but she converted through a Messianic rabbi who has Orthodox smika. And so through his Beit Din was able to convert to be Jewish. So that's sort of where we're standing at on the Jewish question, whether or not we're Jewish or not. And as far as keeping observance and stuff like that goes, I started becoming observant roughly 2012, 2013. Have been increasing and learning from Chabad and Satmar, different, and now Breslov and a couple of other things. So I've been studying Jewish texts in the Beit Midrash. Before I got married, I stayed out till 3 o'clock in the morning every night. I was in a Beit Midrash just sort of studying with Chavrusa, different halachic works, Talmud, Rivkah, get a load, things along those lines. So really gave me a good insight. Everywhere he went, he would point me out as a believer in Yeshua. And so the idea...
Who would point you out? I'm sorry.
My friend, my Chavrusa. He would always be like, this guy believes in Jesus. And I'd be like, oh boy. And so I'd have discussions with rabbis, and rabbis would have discussions with me, and really got to learn a lot about it. And the more I learned about it, the more I sort of became closer and closer to Yeshua. I actually found my study of Judaism, my going into Judaism actually brought me closer and closer to Yeshua. So that's sort of how my story went about. And so right now I'm studying Talmud. I'm about 75% of the way done with studying Talmud, and I learn a lot of halachic works, and so we do stuff like that. We have different studies that we do during the week, and so that's sort of where we're at right now. Does that sort of answer your question, or are you?
Yeah, no. For those who don't know, that's a pretty big accomplishment. The Talmud is ginormous. It's huge, you guys. If you don't know, so that's a really big accomplishment. Did you learn Hebrew?
Yeah, I can read Hebrew pretty well. I can speak Hebrew pretty horribly. The reason for that being is I started learning Hebrew through a Messianic Hebrew lesson study, and then I went and learned Ashkenazic, Hungarian accented Hebrew, and they sort of mix together, and they almost sound like two completely different languages.
Yeah. So really fast, I've got to ask: do you feel mistreated by what happened to you?
Yes and no. It's sort of a little bit of both answers. I can understand their sort of wanting to protect the community. Obviously, you want to protect the community from anything that you may see as a threat. Also, because there's so many different forms of Messianic Judaism, some of which are not really friendly to a Jewish perspective at all. And so when you say that you believe in Yeshua, it's sort of like there's a sort of status quo idea of what that means.
Yeah.
And just because I disagree with it, it's sort of hard, right? Because if you say that you believe in Yeshua, well, what does that mean? And that becomes sort of hard for somebody to determine from an outsider what that's all about. And so I understand wanting to protect against Christianizing of Judaism. We are not that, but at the same time, I can understand the response to protect. So I can understand. I don't feel mistreated in the sense of, you want to protect against something that 9.9 times is something that you're going to want to protect against in your shul. But listen, at the same time, give me a chance to sort of tell my side, explain myself. And so haven't really gotten many opportunities to do that. Rabbi Asher Meza, who's not a follower of Yeshua, I feel like gave me an opportunity to sort of come out and explain a little bit to his group and his gathering. And so yes and no, if that answers the question.
Yeah. So when Asher did the interview with you, I immediately hit up Asher, was like, I gotta get him on my channel. Like immediately, bro, tell me how to get in touch with him. And so I immediately reached out to you, tried to schedule this as quickly as possible. So I wasn't sure if you'd want to come on my channel, because what I do is specifically countering anti-missionary, specifically Tovia Singer, Benenu, so on and so forth.
She's got her sights set. It's not a game.
Target right, dead center. And let me be honest. People are like, why don't you go after any other rabbi? I'm like, well, I could, but he's the biggest name in this area.
Right.
Like, I don't have a desire to go out and counter Orthodox Judaism. That's not what I do. What I do is to give a balanced approach, to show that the validity that I have with being, I'll call myself a Christian. I have no problem with that. That doesn't bother me. Messianic, whatever. A believer in Yeshua, and then give me a chance to explain what that means from my understanding, and then prove that in the Tanakh. And so I often find that there's this one view. So my next question would be, do you feel like the reason why Benenu and all of these other organizations are so hard on quote people like yourself, because Judaism today has kind of narrowed down what it is to be a believer, right? As opposed to really giving the floor to you and saying, tell us why, give us a reason to accept you. Rather, it's kind of the bully on the playground and, throws elbows at anybody that gets in their way. Because that's my perspective. Tell me I'm wrong. But
so with Tovia Singer and Shmuley Boteach, what I find a lot of their answers seem to be specifically those anti-missionaries, and to a lesser extent, Rabbi Moshe Shulman. Their answers seem to be aimed towards a basic Christian understanding, where they're going to try to take you into the Tanakh, and if you aren't really educated very well in sort of the way that things are done in the base midrash, you sort of can get really wrapped up and go that there's this monolithic sense of Judaism that you can't hold this view and be within Orthodox Judaism. As the more and more that you study in Orthodox Judaism and being in the Beit Midrash, you learn that there are actually multiple opinions. One that always comes up in our family, and jokingly I get to tease my wife about, is the idea of peeling a banana. So one of my times in the Beit Midrash, there was one rabbi on one side, whether you can peel a banana on Shabbat or not, and on the other side, you cannot peel a banana. So one took one side and one took the other side. So it goes down to the very idea of peeling a banana, and it depends on what view you're coming from. And there's lots of those different kinds of views. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm going to have to run out, but Rivkah knows a bit herself. And she hasn't studied in Beit Midrash because women typically don't do that. But she's been around me. She's picked up some stuff from me. We disagree even in our own house on some of the views of Judaism. But really, the idea is that Tovia Singer or Shmuley Boteach, they sort of want to paint this monolithic view of Judaism, and there's a lot of different opinions in there, and some of them are held as valid as well. I mean, you look at Chabad. Some of those things are maybe even a little too Christian, even for me. And so I put down the book and go, wait, was this my Christian book or was this?
You got to really.
And so you take a look at those things, and there's a wide range, right? So Chabad is considered Orthodox. Breslov is also, and then there's the opposing views from like modern Orthodox rabbis or sort of yeshivish rabbis who will disagree ardently with some of the views that Chabad holds as well. But in the broad range, I think there is flexibility in that as well. So with that, I'll have to say goodbye, and my wife will come on and hopefully be able to continue conversations with you.
Cool. Thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Well, you can take turns. Pick another one.
All right, I gotta go.
I have 4 children, so just
Congrats.
I have 3. My husband is out with them right now. Praise God, because otherwise they would be. I want to meet them and say hi to them.
Yeah.
I'd never get a chance.
that's why you see little.
When we do Tuesday night Bible studies, my son always comes by and goes, "Hi."
Yeah.
Hi.
So I wanted to give more information on
please.
some of our classes. So like tonight, we're using. We just started this last week actually. So Sunday nights at 7:30 Chicago time because we're in Chicago.
That's Central time, by the way, guys. If you
you're all in Central time. Okay.
Well, he's not.
I'm Eastern.
Okay, you're Eastern. Where's that book? If you go, we have a Facebook page with this info on it. We do we use a Orthodox Jewish commentary, which I'm glancing around to try to find right now, from an Orthodox rabbi, Elijah Tzvi Soloveitchik. His commentary. He's since passed away. He wasn't a rabbi, but he's if you know that name, his last name. There's actually a rabbi who recently passed away from the same family here in Chicago.
Big name, yeah.
Very big name.
Yeah.
And he did a commentary on the Gospels, and the one. So we're going through Matthew, using that commentary. So David teaches that at 7:30 Central Time. I'm doing a Tehillim class on Monday night at 9 p.m. With the hope that my kids will cooperate and actually go to bed when I need them to. But Mashiach through the Tehillim. So I use a few different commentaries for that. And then on Thursday night, we do a Rashi study with the weekly Torah portion also at 7:30, and David teaches that one. So we got a few different classes. And if people go to or like our Facebook, I actually have like links, like the events or whatever you do.
Yeah.
And then it has a link to we do it over Zoom. So anyone can join that. So, and our website's ahavaschinim.com. So that has a whole lot more information. And our goal is to grow a Orthodox Messianic congregation here. So we're trying to get people to move to Chicago, which is, we're right in the middle of the Orthodox Jewish community in the northern part of Chicago.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm sorry. I just want to say, so when you're out in the street, people know who you are, right? How do people? How does the rest of how does some of the Orthodox community know who you are?
Well, so it's like David said, it's kind of a mix. So we have we live in an apartment building, and one side of our house, when we go out, they're always calling us missionaries in the negative sense, screaming at us and whatever, and that's the negative side. And then we have the other side of our house that has welcomed us into their sukkah during Sukkot, and we have a grocery. There's a kosher grocery store right up the street that adores our children, and so it's a wide girth in terms of reaction. And some people don't care. Some people have never talked to us but have their opinions. So it really depends who you're talking to. The rabbis here, I would say for the most part, have a negative outlook just because of the articles and their own misconceptions and things like that. We are in touch with a couple of rabbis here, but it's more because of what it would like. We would love to go to a regular, shul, but we're not able to because of the perception that the rabbis have of what it would. I guess their reputation would get quote unquote tarnished, So So it. Oh, okay, buddy. That's my son. 1 of 4. So that's the reaction we get. So it really varies. I think I would say most of the community has kind of moved past it, and they don't really care one way or the other. I do think that we've had a positive impact for the most part because we didn't run off and move when all that happened.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe a lot of people are just too afraid to talk to us because of what people would say about them. Maybe so I think it's been a positive thing because they see we build a sukkah and we do Pesach, and they literally check our cart, which is kind of weird when we're shopping at stores, but they do, to see if we're keeping kosher and stuff. So I think it's just them trying to be well, you're actually keeping halacha, but
yeah. So for me, what I said from the beginning is, look, I'm gonna tell you real fast and up front, there is zero any bit of. I'm not going to go out and fake a halachic observant life to convert a Jew. It's not going to happen.
Right. And that's the dichotomy that they don't understand, because for so long, and understandable, like David said, it's understandable because I have witnessed, and even here in this community, they have witnessed people who came in and were observant only for the purpose of quote unquote converting them. They weren't actually being authentic or convicted by it or whatever. And so we're kind of fighting. And also just in greater Orthodox Judaism, you have that trend of if you're observant and believe in this guy, it can't be real. And they really struggle with that.
See, I struggle with understanding that because I love the Jewish people. I do. And when I say that, let me make sure I clarify what that means. I have no hate towards Jewish people, towards Muslims, towards anybody. So I think it automatically is assumed that if you're Christian, you're anti-Semitic. Now,
right.
Trust me, I have fought against this. I tell people in the comment sections, watch your mouth. Do not be anti-Semitic on my page, on my channel. And a lot of people don't understand that you can criticize a position without criticizing the people as a whole. And there's anti-Semitism of 100 years ago, and then there's passive anti-Semitism today. But I also recognize that we are getting uber sensitive. Like, you can't criticize anybody, or find out who you can't criticize, and that's who's likely in charge or likely has the highest sway of the people's opinion. So here's my thing. I love the Jewish people, and maybe I am just not as pressed to quote convert people, but there's absolutely no way that anybody is going to get me to live a halakhically observant life to somehow maybe possibly sneak in and convert an Orthodox Jew. I'm not going to do that. And that's the thing is, you can fake it for a month. You can fake it outwardly. You can't fake. I mean, your children
for years,
walk around with a kippah. Like, I have 2 boys. You could not get them to put a kippah on right now. If you want, they'd be like, I'm not doing that. I'll put it on for 5 minutes, but I'm taking it off when it falls off. And I just watched your son throw that thing back on immediately. Like, it's ingrained in them. So for me, it's like, how dare you try and say that these people, just because they believe in Yeshua, that they're not living according to halakha, and they're not living according to their convictions. That's what's messed up to me. That's what's messed up.
Right. Well, I think the reason they do that, and this goes with Tovi Singer, Benenu, and other groups, Yad Lachim, and so forth, is if they're able to discredit a person or a group because they're observant, and they make, they say, oh, they're just observant to convince them of Yeshua or whatever, then they can kind of dismiss the Yeshua argument. So if they come to terms with the fact that these people are actually observant because they're convicted to do so, then they actually have to deal with the Yeshua problem, quote unquote, for them. And they don't want to do that. So they want to distance themselves. So they have to make, like, we just had an article come out about us. The most recent one was December 2021. And because it started, I think Beneno did a portion of, did it. And I think it was Jerusalem Post that did. You can go look it up.
Yeah.
It was hilarious because somewhere in that article, they're going on and on about how they're trying to trick Jews, blah, blah, the same old thing. And then within that article, they took a screenshot of like a Twitter thing I had done, literally saying, we want Jews to come out of the church to learn how to live a Jewish life in a traditional sense. So like they kind of shot themselves in the foot, in my opinion, because they're saying this in the article, but then people can actually see a screenshot of a post we had done saying the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, we actually want Jews to live an authentic Jewish life. And yes, we want Orthodox Jews to understand who Yeshua is in his Jewish context.
I
think I think the biggest I think the issue for me, the problem for me for when I hear you say that, is that by calling the lifestyle that you're walking as authentic, it makes everything else not authentic or not Jewish. And that's kind of the problem that I have, that if I for some reason didn't do something halachically prescribed by Chazal or by one of the Rishonim or Achronim or anybody later on, that somehow my Jewish life is not authentic.
Right.
How do you feel about that? Again, showing that Judaism isn't monolithic in this. How do you? Oh,
yeah. We wouldn't say, I don't know what, Rabbi, I don't know what level of observance you are or whatever. I'm just saying, when the accusation that we get of you're living this a Jewish life, but you're just doing it to trick people. That's what I'm saying. Like,
no, I totally get that. But I'm okay with but I'm saying when you use the language, like, and I'm not trying to press you at all. Absolutely not. I would never think about doing that. I'm just saying, when you use the language that, hey, I want Jews to embrace an authentic Jewish life. So maybe opposed from like a church life, where they're not doing.
Yeah. So what I mean by that,
maybe,
that particular post was about, so there's a lot of Jews. There's a lot of secular Jews, so this could apply to a secular Jew too. But I specifically, in that particular post they had screenshotted, was talking to Jews within the church that believe in Yeshua, but they don't understand Yeshua as a Jew at all. they've been assimilated. So this can also, like I said, apply to a secular Jew, and helping those Jews who are basically living as a Christian, and they're not in touch with their Jewishness at all. We want to help them get in touch with their Jewish, because that's their testimony, right? Like
I would agree with I would agree with part of that, like some sort of version of that. I would definitely.
So in terms of what your opinion is on like what does that lifestyle look like, that can obviously be up for discussion. We live in Orthodox, or fully, living a halachic Orthodox lifestyle. I'm not sure where you're coming from. I haven't talked to you before. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, I don't want to say that you or anybody else's expression of their Jewish walk is illegitimate. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from the Orthodox coming, looking at us and saying, "Oh, your life isn't, you're just faking it," and they shouldn't do that to you either, or anybody else. Like, because what I always tell, there's a particular person I'm thinking of, which I won't mention to give them, we don't want to do Lashon Hara, but there's a person who always comes at us who I've never met, and no matter what I say to this person, they're like, "You're just lying. You're just a Christian." Like, no. And I'm like, I've never talked to you. I've never actually met you in person. And I tell this to everybody, whether they're Orthodox or whatever. And I'm like, sit down and actually have a conversation like we're doing here. Like, we can have disagreements. You could disagree with me that Yeshua, you as an if I'm talking to an Orthodox Jew or something, you can disagree that Yeshua, you may say that Yeshua is not the Messiah. I may, I obviously say he is, and we can have a discussion, but we shouldn't be personally attacking each other, and being like, you're just doing it for such and such reasons. When you've never talked to me, you've never been in my house, you've never,
in my opinion, that's baseless hatred. That's
right. Which is why, if you haven't guessed, why we named our work the Halachic, or to reverse that. Like, okay, you may, but I also try to have, I take it with a bit of salt, because I understand, again, that for so many hundreds, going up thousands of years, that the Jewish community as general have been forced to convert to Christianity. And so this is kind of a new thing reviving, So the Messianic movement started very secular reform, and most of the Messianic community is living secular lives, even the Jews in the Messianic community, and they're pretty much, much of their thinking is Christian still. And now I would say just in the last, I don't know exactly the time frame, but very recently, you now are starting to get people who are halachic Jews who are keeping halakha and believing in Yeshua. So it's pretty new.
Do you think that's necessary? Observing Orthodox halakha and belief in Yeshua together like that?
I'm trying to understand.
So Orthodox halakha, the way you live. Well, I mean, I know you want Jews from the church to do that, right? Would you say that is the big part of your work, is to get Jews who believe in Yeshua to follow Orthodox halakha? Would you say that's a big part of your work?
I don't know if it's a big part. Like, we do teach I would say we encourage it, but we're not like, you have to. Like, I mean, people have to go on their own journeys with Hashem. And so I guess I would say we come alongside people who want to be, to go down that path of the Orthodox lifestyle and things like that. So we work with like converts and things like that. But we do say to non-Jews, like, we don't encourage them to convert or anything like that, because you're right before God. Whether.
So my question, I'm sorry, I don't mean, just before I forget, my question is, Tovia Singer's shtick is what he says, is to pull Jews out of the church that were forcibly converted years ago, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that sounds great on the quote surface,
right? But
here's what I think he actually does. He pulls more Christians out of the church through, in my humble opinion, I'll say it, you don't have to agree, you don't have to say it, deception. Mm-hmm. Saying that there's this narrow monolithic Judaism as opposed
to not, as my husband was saying.
Yeah. And so with that being said, do you think, or do you have any fear that what you're doing might actually do the same thing? And I don't know how to say this, because I don't know exactly what you teach. And if you fall in line with halakha, and what is that? What are you pulling from the sages? So kind of my idea of what I'm asking is, what is your absolute gotta haves beliefs in Yeshua to not be a quote heretic? And I don't throw the word heretic around lightly at all, but like something that is authentically not a belief in Yeshua, but oh, I'm a believer in Yeshua. You get what I'm saying? Like, do you think that you can inadvertently, through your teachings, because you say that you want to keep a Orthodox life, pull people away from Yeshua that actually truly have a belief in him?
I think because we have such a focus on Yeshua, like our entire life, though we live a halachic Orthodox lifestyle, our Rebbe is Yeshua. So like like that's one of the reasons we're going through. Like we did a seminar on going through Yeshua's teachings and how the rabbinic and what or my husband was just working on a paper talking about how he upheld oral tradition and things like that. Obviously, these things were in development. So certainly I don't know a person's heart. Like,
right.
If a person is going to go off the path and not follow Yeshua, that's on them, but we're never going to encourage that. Like so maybe I should state it this way. So we believe that, so our primary focus is the Orthodox community. Okay. Mm-hmm. We're not primarily focused on Jews in the church, that's, or even Messianics. We're focused on my husband talks to, most of the people he talks to are in the Orthodox community. Some are believers in Yeshua, some are not. And those contacts talk together. So we have a study group of an Orthodox man who believes in Yeshua, and then another guy is not a believer in Yeshua but's Orthodox as well, coming from a different group. And then my husband, and they meet every week. So our focus is primarily on the Orthodox Jewish community, if that makes sense, and we want them to understand that they need Yeshua.
Mm-hmm. Which is why Benenu finds you as a threat.
Right. But the difference is we're not what Benenu and other anti-missionaries would say, oh, you're trying to have them believe in Yeshua and become Christians. No, we actually know Orthodox believers who obviously we don't want to get out them. Because unfortunately, we personally know Orthodox Jewish people who live in the Orthodox community who are believers, and that's like Benenu and others can't handle that, and they have to come up with something to explain that away. David had an Orthodox guy who's not a believer tell him, I have to come up with a reason that you don't exist, because the fact that you're living this way and believing in Yeshua, and you're not trying to trick me, and we want Orthodox Jews. We believe they can continue to live Orthodox Jewish life, their Orthodox Jewish life that they grew up in, and be believers at the same time.
Yeah,
which is countering.
This is because Judaism is so big. Okay, right. The Judaism that you see pushed online is not an authentic Judaism. From Tovia Singer, from anti-missionaries, it's not. Judaism has never been that monolithic, and that's where the old joke comes in: 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Because anytime, and that's the same thing with Italians. I mean, people in general are going to have differing opinions about an interpretation on something, and this is where I think it's important to sit down with people and just talk. It's okay. And now which is
why David did Asher Meza. Asher Meza doesn't agree with us. Yes, is fine, but Asher Meza at least gave us the ability to talk versus just dismissing us. I would love if Benenu would actually, or these other anti-missionaries, sit down and talk, but they never will.
They won't. No,
they won't. And I'm not even saying to debate. Just, hey, let's actually sit. I would love it for them to, any of the people they've outed, quote unquote, as fakes or whatever, us or other people that they've outed, to actually sit down. This is my 19-month-old. I don't know what she.
For me personally, I think it is possible for Messianic Jews to live a completely Orthodox halachic lifestyle within a traditional community, and that be consistent with New Covenant belief. I do believe Jews can do that. Like if I had a message,
going to the shul, he wasn't going to the shul primarily to spread the gospel, quote unquote.
No doubt. But what I'm saying is but what I'm saying is, if I had a Messianic synagogue in Lakewood, New Jersey, I might change some of the things as far as what we do in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where there are less Jews, right?
Right.
Reason being, because you want to create the space where they would be comfortable, right?
Mhm.
The problem is that the issue for me and what I find a little bit problematic, and perhaps we could have another roundtable talk. Um, what's problematic for me is that embracing the Orthodox worldview, like the Torah coming from Mount Sinai and those sorts of things. That's where I have a little bit of an issue, because if we're embracing Orthodox halacha because we want to be one with the community around us, I think that's permissible, right? As you're allowing things to be as they are, separating milk and meat, shotness, all those things. I think for being part of that community, embrace them, I think that's okay. But I think it could be problematic when a believer in Yeshua immerses themselves in the Orthodox worldview and they look at the world the way Orthodox Judaism looks at the world in 2022, because there are parts of the Orthodox worldview that are incompatible with the New Covenant faith.
That's completely and totally antithetical to what the New Testament says, and in my opinion is what I like to call knee-jerk reaction Judaism to the New Testament. As opposed to looking at the New Testament and seeing the Jewishness within it. We have now created a Judaism post the New Testament that ultimately was developed in its Masorah and everything to counter the New Testament and Yeshua and everything. And so
yes, I guess it would depend on what aspects you're talking about. And there's
virgin birth, the death of Yeshua literally being an atonement for you so that you can gain access to Hashem via resurrection. These are things most Judaism today will say is antithetical to the Tanakh.
Right. Yeah, and those things we can certainly discuss. Like my husband was like, Orthodox Judaism says that the New Testament in itself is anti-Semitic or anti-Torah or anti-oral or Torah and that kind of thing like that.
Which I have a video showing that to be inaccurate. For those who don't know, Isaiah actually is the first one to call, quote, Jewish or Jewish leaders brood of vipers.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all these things can be discussed. I'm just, so with what we're doing, and Rabbi, again, I don't know what community you're in or what you're doing. And I think it would be great to have more conversations. Like I said, we have no problem sitting down with people who disagree with our views, but as long as it's civil, why not? Like I said, I wish Toby Singer would sit down with us and talk, but he won't, of course, because he wants
Me too.
Into a
Me
box
too.
to talk with you, I don't know.
And I'm not saying I totally disagree with you. I did listen to your husband with Dr. Michael Brown. I listened to him with Asher Meza.
Okay, so
I think there are certain segments of belief in Yeshua that I disagree with. But as far as your orthoprax, what you believe is the right way to practice Judaism, I have zero issue with.
Right.
If you want to go fully Orthodox, rabbinic, Chabad, you want to eat glak kosher and the whole 9 yards because you feel that that's the way God is calling you to live. I have zero issue, right, with how you practice some of these mitzvos and these commandments. I don't leave my house without a kippah. I don't leave without wearing tzitzit. I wear them all the time, right? I study rabbinic literature, right? I keep Shabbat. I keep.
You're
kosher,
talking about.
right?
So you're talking about the theological aspect.
Yes, I think if you view, and these are things, of course, we can more talk about, and I don't want you to feel like the pressure's on you, and you don't even feel like you have to respond to this, but just understand where I'm coming from.
Sure.
The worldview of rabbinic Judaism is at odds with the worldview of the New Testament.
Okay.
Reason being because it gives you another absolute authority by which you look at that authority. So for me, the idea that there is an oral Torah that came from Moshe on Har Sinai is problematic because and also there's a problem with Rambam, right? Rambam says if you don't believe every word that came from the sages, from the Mishnah up to the Gemara up unto the codes afterwards, then you're a heretic and you don't have a chelik in Olam Haba.
Okay.
So the problem is Yeshua is an excrement in Masechet Gittin, and he's in judgment for being a sorcerer within Israel. And this comes from Chazal. So if you believe that the oral Torah came from God on Mount Sinai and is binding on all Jews, you're forced to believe that Yeshua sits an excrement.
Well,
unless you lean more to unless you take more of a Asher Meza stance on that. So where are you at in that?
And that's my question. Right.
So in terms of, my husband has studied that particular one that you're referencing as well as others in the time. What my husband has told me, and like I said, this would probably be because he's the one who studies Talmud.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah.
So he says that's completely off. It's not the Yeshua it's that people say it is. It's not Yeshua the Messiah. It's somebody else with the same name because it was a very common name. And
that's what they say. Yeah.
So if we had Geniza fragments that said Yeshua HaNotzri, would you believe that's Jesus of the New Testament?
What?
if we had fragments that existed that said Yeshua HaNotzri in older documents, would you believe that it was Yeshua of the New Testament?
From
Yeah, in that passage.
I mean, I guess if that came up, we would have
Yeah,
to.
I think, look, and I think that we can, and so just so you understand my perspective a little bit more, right? I think somebody can study Talmud, do Daf Yomi, do all of that stuff, study New Testament, be a believer, live in an Orthodox community, do everything by the Orthodox standard, and still be faithful to Yeshua. And my problem is like some of the worldview and stuff, and some of the
Right. No,
pretzels we get put in because of needing to believe every word that comes from the Savior.
Right. And I think my husband would probably be the one to discuss those things. He actually was working on a paper today on that, not on that particular topic, but more coming from, because we were talking to Michael Brown, who's very Christian in his thinking. I don't want to say, I don't mean that to his detriment, but like trying where Yeshua was coming, he's in a Jewish context, not a Christian context. Yeah. And I really, and so David was actually is working on a paper and a presentation on his perspective of oral law and Yeshua. So I think,
and I have no qualms, like, for you not answering that. Right. I'm just trying to help you understand where I'm coming from, and like, don't feel pressure. Please don't feel pressure from me. But I'm just, as I think about it, right, and how I live as a rabbi and as a Jew.
And that makes sense. Like, we believe in Yeshua, which is not the mainstream Orthodox Jewish view, so that I can, it's like, how do we deal with that? And that's a lot of what my husband talks about with Orthodox context that we have. So it's really interesting, and it's interesting that we now have Orthodox who've grown up that way. We didn't grow up Orthodox, so we don't know nearly as much as someone who grew up in the community. So it's really interesting when we're talking to those people, how they understand Yeshua within their own context, growing up Orthodox and continuing to be whatever group they're part of, whether Chabad or Breslov or just a regular, I would say a modern Orthodox Jew. So it's really interesting hearing their. So I think that would, I think I'll ask that too, because David actually speaks to them every week. So I think that would be a great question to ask an Orthodox Jew who grew up that way and is a believer. How do you deal with these things within oral Torah that seem to go against things?
And there are others who have different readings of this passage. They'll say, you know why Yeshua is an excrement? You know why Yeshua is a sorcerer? Because this is what Am Yisrael thought about him when he was sold to Edom, right? And goes to Rome. So there is a way to read it that can reconcile it. I'm concerned with how you do that, right? You and your family, how you guys do that, where I know how others can do it. Yeah,
right. Well, that passage. It
doesn't need to be that passage specifically. Okay. I don't feel like we have to be that passage. I'm just those kinds of things, right? Right. Because that's not the only passage that speaks about
how we approach it is we have to take each of those things within its context and study them out, and we have to work that out, I guess is the best way to say it. And we have to study them, and we're open to looking at them. And because obviously I think we should be very specific. Okay, this seems to go against what Yeshua is saying, and how do you deal with that if you accept an oral Torah as coming from outside? So that's fair. And I think my husband as well is.
Yeah, that's great. Do you pray the Shemona Esrei from your own siddur?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to with 4 kids. So my husband davens 3 times a day. Does the Amidah every 3 times a day.
Do you pray out of a traditional Orthodox siddur?
Yeah, my husband davens out of the Arizal, which Chabad uses, and I daven typically out of Breslov.
I'm only interested because that has ramifications for some theological output as you pray that siddur, right? Because it has meaning into it. Embedded within it are thoughts about the Messiah, thoughts about the world to come, thoughts about redemption.
Here's something that I personally do, or my husband and I both do, because it's not actually in the Arizal Siddur, but he likes to add this prayer from Breslov. So Breslov has a really interesting thing in their Siddur that talks about the Rebbe, and they call the Rebbe, they're talking about attaching themselves to Rabbi Nachman, right? So we don't say Rabbi Nachman because we're not Breslov. We say we attach ourselves, we put Yeshua in there, that he is our foundation, and all the ways they describe him. We want to attach ourselves in this to Yeshua, because he's the Mashiach, not Rabbi Nachman. Because there's Breslov who think Rabbi Nachman is Mashiach, so we don't agree with that. But the fact of attaching ourselves to Yeshua, we have no that's how I use the Breslov prayer. So,
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I mean, when we pray out of Messianic Sidors, we make adaptions all the time. I don't have a problem praying the Yigdal. I don't have any
so I
problem.
guess just discussing like, okay, how do you deal with this particular thing? I don't know what you're referring to with the Amidah or other.
No, so yeah, in the Shemona Esrei, there's a prayer that was definitely written for the Manim, and the Geniza fragments are basically cemeteries for scrolls. As you know, you can't put a Sefer Torah just anywhere. You have to you have to bury it. So when these Genizas, these cemeteries, these graveyards of scrolls are dug up, they find the older renderings of a lot of the prayers, and some of the prayers, like the Shemona Esrei, specifically mention, those who follow Yeshua, right? Nosrim. Those followers of Yeshua, and it's essentially was incorporated to be a curse upon the believers.
When I read that, I'm reading it in a different, or pray that, I'm praying in a different sense. I prayed against like those who were against me, like.
And I'm okay with that, and I'm totally cool with that. I have no qualms with you adapting the
I do
to your own
understand
context. I'm just trying to understand where you're at and how you really reconcile those things.
That's how I work that one out.
Cool.
In particular, is for me personally. Okay, I obviously I'm not bringing a curse upon myself, and I understand within the context of where that historically came from and why they did that. But as a believer in Yeshua, I'm praying against the enemies of Israel in general, and a curse on those who want to harm Israel, and an extra protection for those Orthodox or Jews who believe in Yeshua and living a Jewish life. Like, so that's how I take that. Even though historically, I understand, I'm familiar with the historical why that was written and so forth.
And I'm not saying that. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that I haven't heard some of these answers and what people do. I was just curious for you so people can hear. I mean, these aren't some of the things that Asher asked, and these aren't the things that Michael Brown asked. So I was just curious, about some other perspective as a Messianic rabbi, and me knowing the rabbinic literature. How do you navigate this?
So that's how I
so people could understand how you do that. Yeah. And Gittin is not a slam dunk either. There are answers for it. I was just curious if you thought about these things from your husband. So.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it, and I've run into a lot of these things. Over the course of the years I've been doing it. So
what's interesting for me is, as I have a whopping 0.2% Ashkenazi Jew in me. So, but what's funny is I tell all my Orthodox friends, like, hey, I got some Jewish in me now. You got to listen to you got to hear my interpretations, but it's funny to me because I sit and guys, this just shows the diversity within the flavors. And I think that's why Rabbi Eduardo's labels it Messianic, what is it? Unraveling
Messianic Judaism unraveled.
Yeah, because there's a lot there. And again, going back to some of the stuff that you missed in the beginning, like there's rabbis who see a passage to be about Yeshua, and there's rabbis who don't. Both are halicically observant. They'll look at the passage and go, I don't see it.
There's one of the things my husband loves to mention to people who don't know, in the Arizal actually mentions Yeshua. So he's talking about in his book, Shar HaGilgalim, which I don't really buy into a lot of the Gilgalim theologically. I have issues with that, like reincarnation as a bird if you do this particular sin, and other I'm not, that's not me. I think you're gonna theologically I have a problem with that, with the Arizal. But he does say in there that it mentions the graves of the righteous, right? And he mentions where they all are, and that he learned from the righteous, and he mentions Yeshua HaNotzri by name in there. And and in the Hebrew it says that that the Arizal learned from Yeshua HaNotzri. And my husband has discussed that with other Orthodox, and they don't know how to explain that because they're like. That like how can our Arizal like have something positive to say about Yeshua, and the translation tries to spin it negative, but if you actually look in the Hebrew, it's not.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Source.
That's you, Rabbi. That's you.
That's a good source. That's a great source.
He's got
I never heard
that say positive things about Yeshua as well. That's the one that he always that comes to the top of my head. So there are sources that definitely have positive things to say about Yeshua, and when you bring that up to Orthodox who don't believe in Yeshua, they don't know what to do with it because they can't go against the Arizal,
Yeah. Well, see, and I think that's where it really comes to understanding that the Judaism that you see today is kind of the loudest Judaism, right? They say if and I don't know how else to say this to give you an analogy. You tell a lie long enough, loud enough, people will believe it. Okay. So if you become the loudest person on the block long enough and speak loud enough for long enough, people are going to think you're an authority. They're going to appeal to you, and they're going to somehow, and not look at anything else. This is where I always say, let the New Testament be like its own rabbi. Let's call it Rabbi New Testament. And Rabbi New Testament brings an interpretation on Isaiah 27 or Isaiah 59 or Isaiah 53 to you. Listen to it. Let's listen to it and then compare it to other passages. I think that's where people don't do that, and they automatically think, oh no, something's not messianic. See, I happen to believe, now this is my personal interpretation, I think that Gamliel was a believer in Yeshua eventually before his life. I personally believe that. There's reasons I believe that. And I think the problem then becomes, oh no, because if Gamliel was a believer, then that essentially means that we are going to get some of the biggest names in Judaism.
Right.
And that, I'm not saying that's, look, I agree with Dr. Michael Brown on a lot of things, but I fundamentally agree with him on the way that he presents Isaiah 7. I believe that the way I present Isaiah 7 is much.
You disagree with him. You disagree with him.
No.
I thought I heard you say you agree with him.
I agree with him that it's about Yeshua.
Okay.
I disagree with the way that, how do we prove that it's about Yeshua? And if you go, you can see my video. I think that my interpretation on this is much more accurate. I keep the chapter in its actual historical context of a civil war, while simultaneously showing you that this 1 or 2 passage is about Yeshua to come 700 years from now. So I think that's what's important, is allowing each person. So here we are on this roundtable discussion, which we're going to wrap up pretty soon. And we've got 3 different flavors. For what I do, I stick typically with just what the Tanakh says. I deal with just what it says, okay? And I believe, in my humble opinion, that you can find the answers to interpret the Tanakh within the Tanakh itself. I don't think that you need rabbis and sages, and not that they're not good, but that they are just that. They're a commentator. Like, I commentate on the scriptures all the time. You don't need me, but here's my position. And Isaiah 7, I have a position. And if you listen to me and you're like, dang, that was kind of convincing, I'm going to go study it out. Then we should do that with other people. And then you've got Rabbi Eduardo here, who has smicha, and he's got this ordination, he's got this teaching, he's got this way of understanding. But because of that, oh no, wait, you're Messianic, you don't actually have smicha. And then I have to come in and try and say, wait a minute, hold on. Nobody has smicha. No one has smicha in the from Moshe. It's just not the way it is. But there's this bias. And I think that's what my channel and Rabbi Eduardo's channel is really trying to show. Whereas I think most heavily Orthodox leaning people don't really discuss that, because it's well, we're already the outlier. We don't really want to become more of an outlier. And that's where I think we should, in today's society, we're not killing each other. This isn't, battle of, Courtney versus Tovia, whichever one loses lose their head. This isn't like this nowadays. We should be able to come together and not hate each other. But
have they ever responded to you?
Never. Well, as a matter of fact, the other day I posted something on my Facebook page from another social of mine, and Shannon did not know that it notifies me whenever you open it up and view it. And it said that Benenu had opened it up and viewed it. And I screenshot that and I blasted her, because I think it's important. She's stalking my stuff, but she's blocked me on everything hers. And all I did was ask for a debate. All I did was say, look, Tovia, very personally, Tovia, can you please just say, hey, I've got a Christian that wants to debate you. I mean, you debate Christians, call me a Christian, that's fine, whatever. I'm not Jewish. I mean, I got 0.2% Ashkenazi Jew. I'm not Jewish, right? Like, let's debate. But he doesn't want to debate anybody that keeps Torah, and I keep Torah, and I've been Torah observant for over 10 years, not in a halachic sense, but nevertheless, he won't debate Rabbi Eduardo. He won't debate Yitzhak Shapiro. I mean, there's people that he's fundamentally rejecting for a debate, because he knows that will reveal that the Messianic way is much broader than he makes it out to be. And you guys are,
if he debates, he's obviously debated people like Michael Brown, because they're coming at it from a very in my opinion, a Christian viewpoint.
Yeah, well, see, and I'm going to be real with you. I think he's still licking his wounds from Michael Brown. I think Michael, regardless of how, and yeah, Michael Brown boasts in his Jewishness.
Gave him a whooping.
I'm sorry, but he pulled out sources that I don't think Tovia thought he knew, and he wasn't ready. Tovia wasn't ready.
He wasn't ready.
He wasn't ready. And yeah, so anyway, he's licking his wounds still, and I think that's the thing that hurt him. And he says, in my opinion, I'm not even gonna debate anyone that knows halakha, can speak Hebrew, or keeps Torah. And
the extent to which we tag people, right, Courtney? I mean, on that same post, you know, and Courtney saw it. I said, how about, and I tagged Benenu, and I tagged Toby Singer. How about Courtney and myself versus Toby Singer and Shannon in a debate? Benenu, what do you think? And I tagged them in the Facebook post. No response, nothing.
None. And then even furthermore, when I personally went to her socials that I wasn't blocked on yet and said, hey, please, Shannon, tell him, like, I'll see you in Tennessee in T-minus 3 weeks. I'm gonna be there regardless. So with that being said, tell him. And she blocked me. Like
I really feel like that just shows that they want to have people in a certain box,
yes,
and keep them in that box, and so they're not going to debate you. I mean, if you're not even Jewish, why are they afraid of you? Like, okay, they could just say, well, she's a different religion, but they don't want to deal with the fact that you're
because I'm going to bring out sources that they know.
That just disproves them without ever, I don't know. That just.
Yeah, they're biased, and that's what it is. And that's why I wanted y'all to tell your story in your own words without being biased. And Rabbi Eduardo has his story and how he came to where he's at, and they don't want to hear it. And they're painting this internet picture of Judaism that's not true. But guys, we're fixing to wrap it up. I'm going to allow you guys to please give all your the internet locations where you're at, what you're doing, your goals. So let's start with Rabbi Eduardo. Please tell us your channels, any socials, any teachings, lectures, any places you're going to be talking.
Cool. So rabbieduardo.com is the website where you can learn more about me. You'll find a link to my channel, synagogue, stuff like that. You'll get my bio, my background. Channel on YouTube is Rabbi Eduardo, where I host a show called Messianic Judaism Unraveled. You can find my Patreon, find out to support what I do, take your topics, your subjects. I'm open to debates. Anyone who wants to debate the Jewishness of Yeshua, whether you're Orthodox, Rav Draw, any one of these guys, El Talki, any one of those guys who have come against Yeshua. Doesn't matter if you're Michael Skolback, Moshe Shulman, any one of you guys could get it if you want the smoke. I know you don't, but if you do, send me an email, rabbieduardoroy@gmail.com. We do it when you want to. I'll do it on my own dime. You don't have to pay for it. I'll fly myself out. And we can debate, is Yeshua the Jewish Messiah? Is the New Testament Jewish? Was Yeshua a Jew? All right, do the prophecies point to Yeshua? We could debate it whenever you want. So.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, Rivkah, you can tell us any sources your husband has that he wants to. I know y'all are trying to build a community, so I don't know if you have sources online yet for people to look up. Yeah, so
right. So ahavaschanim.com. It's on the screen there,
which is on the guys.
Yeah, and then same Facebook. I do have our Facebook called Ahavas Chanim Synagogue because that's what our aim is. We have, and through there we also have a YouTube channel. Like I mentioned earlier, we have Zoom classes, and those are also, I think Facebook is probably the best way to get in touch with us. And we also have info@ahavaschanim.com as well. People want to email us. And so all the information about classes and everything is either on our website or on the Facebook. And there's links and things. And then you can get from there, you can go to our YouTube channel, and we post things on there occasionally as well. So that's the best way to reach us. And yeah, we're trying to build a community. So if people are looking for a community, get in contact with us, because we also know there's people out there who in the middle of, aren't around anybody. So
yeah, Canada.
We want to be a support to people. We want to be a support to people. So if at least nothing else, they can attend classes and be around people who can be edifying.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate this. This was great, and it's nice to meet you. I've not heard much about you, Rivkah, so it's actually nice to kind of hear about the
always with the kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know David would love to connect with Rabbi and Eduardo.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so
nice meeting you also.
Hopefully
Thank you.
We can have more roundtable
Yeah, it'll be good.
Discussions. Yeah. And
maybe
so guys,
David and you can decide on what you, I don't know if you want to call it a debate or just a discussion. I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss it. Look, I think you guys had enough heat, I don't want to give you more heat, but I'd like to have a discussion so people can understand, and hopefully we both come out sharper from it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you being here. Once again, this is Biblical Apologetics. My name is Courtney, your host. So if you like this, please share, like, go to their socials, look them up, show them some love. And once again, thank you. Shalom Aleichem.